Okay, beautiful. So before we get started, I just want to do a quick acknowledgement of the country. So I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of Noongar people. I'm currently based in Fremantle, WA. Feel free to let me know where you guys are in the chat below. And I'm going to share my presentation with you now. And we're going to get started. All right, so as I said, this presentation is all about the journey towards carbon neutrality. I work for a company called ClimateClever, and I work with businesses all the way from the beginning of having conversations about their operational carbon footprint to getting them on board. And for some of our clients, that means going to net zero. I have a background in sustainability and work in different types of industries and mostly with smaller to SME companies. And this beautiful event is being hosted by the Eco Living Festival, who is with our partner Randwick City Council, who is one of our partners. And this is the last week. I don't know, also let me know in the comments if you guys have joined any other, I'm just gonna click my email quickly, if you guys joined any other events as well during this festival. Okay. So just a brief agenda. I'm going to give you a quick overview of ClimateClever, as that's the company that I'm working for and it's being facilitated by. And just to give you a bit overview where we're actually taking this information from and where we're at as a company. Then we're going to go into the definition of what does carbon neutrality mean? What does net zero mean? I'm not sure what your guys' experience is in the sustainability field, but just let's get into the nitty-gritties and sort of define what that really looks like. Then we're going to go into what does that mean for a business, so the different steps to become a carbon neutral business. I also want to highlight the why now is the time, and just give you a bit more context what's been happening in the global sphere and the different policies coming into play. We're going to do a Q&A, so feel free to prepare any questions. We'll see if it works, you guys asking me questions over Zoom. If not, then we'll just use the chats in the corner. I'll just add a few people in. All right, so as any good company, it always starts with people, and I just want to bring the faces to the company so you guys have a bit more of an idea. So ClimateClever got started by Dr. Vanessa Rowland. She is our founder and CEO, and Vanessa has over 10 years of experience of being an academic in this area, doing a PhD and starting ClimateClever. And her background is in decarbonizing cities, and she really saw through her work as being an academic that there needs to be more tangible action, not only for businesses, but for local governments, schools, and individuals. It needs to be in day-to-day life, so people actually do take more actions on climate change. After a while, we got joined by Alexander Karen, who is our co-founder and CTO, who builds the technology. So we actually have a team of developers who build the whole platform and try to make it as seamless as you can have it as a user. So making sure the design looks really great and all the functionality behind it. And that's sort of our team. So we've got one side who are more of the expert field in sustainability, and then we've got our developers who actually build the application itself. And the story started in 2012. So Vanessa managed to get the first school to become carbon neutral, so certified carbon neutral school in Australia. And that was back in 2012. So we've come a long way. And during that process alone, we have learned so much about what it means to certify a school to become carbon neutral. And in that process, we have seen that it actually reduces thousands and thousands of dollars on your utility bills. And that goes in hand with reducing your carbon footprint. It has also opened up this world of getting students to be a bit more integrated and more engaged in sustainability topics and really bring it to the forefront of what it means to be carbon neutral, where does your carbon footprint come from, etc. And it's a really great place to start as well, just because schools is where you meet the teachers and the parents and the community gets together. And that's sort of where our journey has started. So speaking of our journey, this is just a bit of a roadmap so you can imagine what we've been doing over the last few years. So from our first pilot in 2012, we have now a platform for our schools and a school program. We work with over 90 schools across Australia, which is amazing. We also have a home application and we have a growing usage every month. We work with local governments, Randwick City Council being one of them, with businesses. So that's predominantly what I do. I work with diverse range of businesses, and we've got businesses anywhere from GPs to architects, breweries, the list really goes on. And that's sort of our journey with being in the community. I also wanted to put this slide on here and just sort of open up the topic a little bit. So these are actually one of our clients based here in WA, and they were in the West Australian, had a quick article about how easy it was actually to become carbon neutral and demystifying this whole process. And these are the steps outlined here, and I'll get into more in depth inside them in a bit. So step one is to measure your carbon footprint, the reduction, offset, disclosing and communicating it, and then repeating that process. And yeah, just an example of a real life business to sort of demonstrate that it doesn't have to be difficult. And this particular business managed this process within a few weeks of measuring their carbon footprint, setting the strategies they're going to do to reduce it, buying offsets, and then disclosing it on their website. So around the definition, what does carbon neutrality really mean? What does that stand for, or net zero? So just to read the definition, having a net zero carbon footprint is about reaching a balance between the emissions of carbon into the atmosphere and the removal of climate pollution through elimination, carbon sinks, and other offsets. What that basically means, every business creates carbon footprint. And to eliminate it, you either need to eliminate the carbon footprint you create or purchase offsets to go to net zero. So that's sort of the best way to go about it, to become net zero. So you always need to find, and the reason why we actually call it net zero, that you're not always able to do it by behavior. You have to purchase offsets to become a carbon neutral business. So I'm going to put into a graph because it's always a little bit more easier than seeing a text, so you can actually visualize it. So the first step is to calculate your emissions, to know what we call this baselining, to know what your carbon footprint looks like. So as an example, for a small office-based company, for somebody like an architect or an accountant, that might look like 10 tons roughly. The next step is to actually reduce it. So you try and reduce your carbon footprint, and you can do that multiple ways by behavior changes, and we'll get into that in a bit, or purchasing green power, solar panels, etc. And then the remaining of that, you try and offset. So this is buying offsetting credits and different projects to become to net zero. And that's why it's net, because you're actually, you can't just have a carbon footprint and make it zero by just doing behavior changes. There's actually things you have to, other steps you have to do to get to net zero. But it's one step at a time, and it doesn't have to be extremely complicated. So I get often, I guess, ask this question of what does that actually look like for my business? What does my carbon footprint mean? And I know it can sound like a really simple question, but I think those are the questions we really need to start addressing. So it's all your business activities. It's from you making a coffee in your kitchen at your office, to driving to your client site, to commuting to a big meeting and running your laptop. All those activities of you using consumption of electricity and water and transport, that produces CO2 that goes into the atmosphere, and that's how your carbon footprint actually accumulates as a business. So these are all your operational activities. You, of course, have also your supply chain. So when you purchase laptops and your value chain, or if you manufacture something, that can get a bit more complicated, and I'll get into that in a sec. But this is your operational carbon footprint. This is what it takes to sort of run your business or your company on a day-to-day basis. So let's get into the steps now. So step one, so what does that look like? So I'm going to give you a bit of background on how we actually calculate carbon footprint. So your carbon footprint comes in 3 different scopes. Scope 1 is the combustion of fossil fuels. So you're actually turning on your lights in your home and cooking a meal or putting the kettle on, all these activities are your scope 1 emissions. Scope 2 is you purchasing the electricity. So the reason why that's in scope 2 is because it doesn't happen on your site, on your business site. It actually happens in a different location, and that's why it's a scope 2 emission. And scope 3, these are your other indirect emissions. So this is oftentimes sort of the supply chains activities along the way of manufacturing something. Also waste falls under that category, and air travel as well. Now, what does that look like for your business? Well, all this information actually is your consumption information. So it's things like your utility bills from your electricity, your water, your gas. All that consumption data is actually your carbon footprint. It's a really great way and accurate way to know what your carbon footprint looks like. For travel is the car distance that your car travels to. Air travel is from and to. So if you're flying from Melbourne to Sydney, we can calculate your carbon footprint depending on that. It's all those different activities and the data behind it that we can actually measure your carbon footprint. The second step is to reduce. So once you know your baseline and you know what that number looks like for you, you actually try and reduce that carbon footprint. And something we try to really educate our users on a lot at ClimateClever is to try and reduce it without just measuring and going straight to offset, because we need to create those behavior changes in order to actually reduce our carbon footprint as a business, as a society as well. So actually, as well, from just to give you guys a bit of a background for that, when we did a lot of the studies with the schools, we identified that 75% of those changes they made, they were actually behavior changes. So there were changes, things like turning off the lights when you're not in the room or when you finished your meeting, and turning off the screen and boiling less water in a kettle. It all sounds really small, but actually adding it up, if you change that mentality around how you operate your business, you can make great changes. And that's all the behavior changes that you can be doing. The second category is retrofits and upgrades. That means making sure that your house is as efficient as it possibly can be. Things like having LED lighting on and just making sure that all the everyday usage are up to date to the most efficient, because that's a great way to start reducing, and it doesn't always have to cost a lot. And the third, which is probably the most expensive, but it's an investment that will sort of reflect in the future, is things like purchasing solar or renewable energy, which I'm sure you guys are very aware of, or purchasing green power from your utility company. So you can very much email your utility company and ask them, do you guys feed green power into the grid? If yes, can I purchase X amount of percentage as part of my bill? And that's a really great way to start reducing your carbon footprint in a really impactful way. The third step is to offset. So once you have your baseline and you've tried to reduce it as much as you can, in most cases, businesses really can't get to net zero just without doing those behavior changes. There will always be, I don't want to say always, but in most cases, there has to be a purchasing of credits or some projects to get to net zero. So what does that look like? It looks like purchasing credits, which can look in many different ways. Things like replantation of trees that can happen overseas or in Australia, investing in renewable energy, also here or somewhere else. You can buy these credits. They really vary on price. Generally, the ones from overseas and from different countries are cheaper than the ones in Australia. We always say, just make sure where you're purchasing your offsets that they've been certified and that you really get all the information of the offset project and the way it's been done. So just really make sure that if you're buying offsets, they're very, very credible. And then the fourth step is to disclose and communicate. And this is really the fun part. So once you know what your carbon footprint looks like, it's time to put it on your website or as part of your brochures, and to really take your stakeholders and your customers that you've calculated your carbon footprint as a business. And in those reports, usually what you have to include, it looks like disclosure of the methodologies, so how you've calculated your carbon footprint, the boundaries of your emissions, which is super important. That means what have you included? So if you include your water and your electricity and your air travel, but you haven't included your car travel, you should disclose why not, if you haven't had access to that information or for whichever reason, why you haven't included that. So that's the boundaries of your emissions. That's what you're measuring. Your results, your offset certificates. and then you can celebrate your achievements. So you can actually say on your website, your ClimateClever business or your carbon neutral net zero, whatever you call yourself, as long as you disclose or report with all the information next to it. So you can be a net zero business tomorrow as long as you've disclosed all the different information on how it's been calculated and what your results look like. And this can be such a great opportunity for businesses to really show their users that they're taking that step. So a bit more information on why right now is the time. Why now is the time, and I wanted to guys give you a bit more context on why this industry is sort of exploding and why it's important for businesses to take action. So maybe some of you know already this framework, but it's come from the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 goals that the United Nations has addressed as the most important areas that the world has to start focusing on. As you guys can see, number 13 is climate action. So taking action on climate is one of those goals. And first of all, we're seeing more and more companies aligning with these frameworks, saying my products, my services, or the actions I'm taking actually align with this bigger vision. And also other companies are just focusing on taking a climate action of things like reducing their carbon footprint to demonstrate to the world on my local level, we are aligning ourselves with the larger framework. I also wanted to bring up here the European Green Deal. So I'm sure by now you guys know that my accent is not from Australia. I'm originally from Europe. And the European Union is a really great example of showing that the United Nations independent body setting a goal, and then the intergovernmental organization like European Union is now actually looking on the steps and the different plans they're going to do for their member states. So just to give you a big summary, because you can definitely look on yourself what the Green Deal is proposing, but it's definitely mindful. So I just wanted to put the most important points out here. So the EU has announced that they want to be climate neutral by 2050. They also, not just that, but they have a plan to reduce their carbon by 55% by 2030 compared to that in 1990, which is really great, putting those sort of dates on there. So it's not just that massive goal that in 40 years will be carbon neutral. And I have series of packages that really vary anywhere from households to small businesses to investments. If businesses want to invest in sustainability project, how does that look like? They're also releasing their carbon border adjustment mechanism. That means companies trading with the EU. And once they're more climate neutral, what will that look like for companies from Australia trading with them? It's very, very interesting. They've put a lot of different ideas on the board and put some really tangible ways on how we're going to get there. And it's one example how a membership is really dealing with this action. And it's definitely going to, just from all the signals we're getting, it's going into the US, the Australian government's talking about it. We're going to see more and more governments and organizations create goals and different structures for businesses to take on this step. I also wanted to mention something about profitability, which for everyday business, it's an important point. And I know that carbon neutrality and sustainability can seem at such a big add-on to something like helping your local charities. And yes, it's important, but there's actually a real opportunity here. There's an opportunity here just because we see that consumers are willing to pay more for environmentally friendly products. That doesn't mean greenwashing. That means if you are disclosing your carbon footprint and you are showing to your customers taking a stance, it can be a great opportunity to align with something that's bigger and show to your customers that versus your competitors, you are actually doing something to really highlight the importance of climate action. Okay, so we've sort of gone through the first part of the presentation. I'm going to now open it to any Q&As if you guys have any other questions, and then we'll jump into a demo of the application. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask. If that won't work, we'll just go into the chat section. I can already see there is. Yeah, if it's easier, then you guys can just type in your question. Thank you for sending me your location as well. It's great to see where you guys are based. And maybe just to open it up, I'd love to know which sort of industry you guys are working in. Ooh, I've got a question from Albert. So what is the benefit to my business to becoming net zero? Great question, Albert. So there are multiple benefits of doing it. If you're looking just for the economical value, we can actually see that companies that go net zero are more likely to be chosen over other competitors. So if you're in a specific industry and you're the net zero business in that industry, or maybe a handful of those companies, you're more likely that the customers that you're working will choose you if they have that sort of relation to sustainability. So that's from the financial point of view. From the second benefit, I think also setting up yourself ahead of the curve. So as we've seen, this action will come into place very, very soon over the next few years and decades. And by you doing it now, it sort of puts you as the leader in your industry, which can be a very, very great way to boost your credential as a business. So I hope that sort of answers your question. Got another long one here from Catherine from Randwick. All good, Albert. So Catherine is mentioning about a carbon program. Maybe Catherine, if you could unmute yourself and maybe give us a bit more context for that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, hi everyone. I just wanted people to know that the tiny nation, which is also one of the poorest in the world to our north, Timor-Leste, has got this amazing carbon program that's working, that's been offering offsets. They've just gone into evaluation. So any month now we're expecting new ones to come online, and it's gold standard certified. It was established by co-founded with a Timorese woman and man, but an Aussie, Andrew Maha, who's down in Melbourne. So, you know, it's one of those that sort of builds our links between communities and nations. So I just thought if people don't know about it, that they might like to know about it. And I was just curious to know, you know, because this one has got a great community development program. It's creating women leaders in the community. Like, it's got so many other benefits in addition to the carbon offsetting. And I just wondered, you know, for small businesses, if you had any examples of carbon offset programs that you think are particularly stand out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Catherine. That was fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing, and a great example as well. So there are many projects out there. And as you mentioned, depending what sort of you're looking for as a business, I just on top of my head here at WA Local is Carbon Neutral company that has great offset certified, gold standard certified in WA. And they mostly focus on biodiversity. So they actually replant and bring the biodiversity back in certain areas of WA. So if that's something of interest to you, maybe that would be worthwhile to look for. And as you said, it sort of depends for as a business, what's sort of close to you or to your industry as well. I think some companies want to look more at the biodiversity side of things, other the renewable energy sector, some more to do with the social side of things. So just was one of the examples, but feel free to message me as well after. I'll give you my details at the end of the talk. And as part of our application, I can also advise you who to go and offset with, depending on your interests and needs as a business. I got another question here from Nikki. So Nikki's asking, is the only measurement in terms of count or units reduction, rather than having a scientific calculation to clarify your business is actually carbon neutral? Is this still acceptable when it's not validated? Okay, so a bit of that conversation of is it scientific or not? So in terms of our ClimateClever platform, all the calculations are based on consumption, which is the most accurate way to calculate carbon footprint and has been done for many, many years. You can also calculate your carbon footprint on financial data, but that's estimated carbon footprint because you're only estimating what your carbon footprint looks like. So as long as you're getting it from your consumption data, which as I've shown is from your bills and the kilometers you've traveled is not what you have spent money on and it's not the averages, then that's the best way and that's the most accurate way to calculate your carbon footprint. And in terms of scientific, can you maybe a bit more clarify what you mean by having a scientific calculation? That would be fantastic. Or if you want, you can also unmute yourself and ask us all.
Yeah, sorry, I was meaning like B Corp certification, someone external that's validating that your company is carbon neutral.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Yeah, so our emissions are based from the governmental emissions factors that are published every year. So that's the way that we make sure that our factors are very accurate and we actually get local factors as well. So if you're based in WA versus New South Wales, your emission will differ because it depends how much green power is being fed into the grid. But if you want to get it, we don't offer a certified carbon neutral certification, just because we believe that as long as you disclose your carbon footprint and you have the report of how you've done that, that's totally efficient and it's legal. There is a governmental organization called Climate Active. Hope I got that right. Yeah, I think Climate Active. If not, I'll send an email after. And they actually certify companies to become certified carbon neutral under the governmental scheme. But saying that it can be a little bit complex doing that, just because there's a little bit more steps than just getting your carbon footprint calculated. So I hope that sort of answers your questions. If you want to go into that certification route, Climate Active is your way, but there's nothing stopping you from getting your carbon footprint calculated as long as you disclose it how you've done that. Okay, we've got another question from Michelle. Do you have a tool/checklist that you could share with the list of various areas to look at in order to measure our emissions? You mentioned utilities and travel, but what else should we measure? Okay, great question. And I'll get into that when we get into the app, because that's going to be a bit easier to show you what our app measures. And as well, what will that look like for a business? What sort of information you'll have to gather? Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we move on. Anybody else? No? Okay, so I think I'll move on. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to ask me after the next part. We'll open that up again. So I'll just close that for now. All right, so I'll just give you a quick demo of the app. Oh, actually, sorry about that. I'll actually have got a few more slides here. Maybe that's a little bit more easier to see. So as I said, the company I'm working for called ClimateClever has developed a tool to actually start tracking this information. So all we sort of learned in the first part, what do you actually do to get your carbon footprint measured? So we work with, as I said, with different businesses, and we can actually help in that platform to calculate, reduce, and offset your carbon emissions. And now I'm going to give you the quick demo so you guys can sort of understand and also answer your question on what exactly you need to gather. So this is our application. This is our ClimateClever business application. And as you can see, we're right now on dashboard, but we have 4 different areas. So we have our measure section, audit, action, and track. I won't go into everything. I just want to show you the most important things that might be interest of you. So we're actually going to start with measure, which, as I said, that's the first step, what you need to measure. And in the app, currently, you can measure electricity, gas, LPG, water, waste, vehicle, paper, and air travel is coming very soon. So with your question, this is sort of the information that you will need to gather. It covers most likely everything for an operational carbon footprint. If there's anything missing, please make sure to email us. We're always adding different energy streams. It's always just depending on what the government publishes every year, because we need the emission factors to actually calculate your carbon footprint. So the reason why we won't have a category in here is it's not because we don't want to add it, it's just we don't have the accurate data to actually calculate it on. And the way it works, it's fairly easy. All you need to do is get your bills. So let's just start with electricity. You actually create an account in the application. So you add a new account, you add the account name, the number, add the different utility company you're working with. We have most of the common ones across Australia. If it's not on the list here, we can always add it in. You can already here select if you've purchased any green power as part of your bill. If you've got solar panels on your roof, you can tick that, and then the meter number as well, which is also on your bill. And once that gets saved, that is saved in the platform, and you don't have to worry about that. And all you need to do is to add bills. So the way that works, you just take your bills, and we always say to calculate your carbon footprint, the easiest way, and it's sort of the standard across our industry, is to have a baseline of last year. So 2020, you'll need to get all that information together, and you write the date from to the total consumption, total cost. So 4 different fields. And once you see it on the bill, it's kind of easy to just put all your information in there. And then the way it works, the app sort of formulates this little receipt here that calculates the cost, the consumption, if you've got any solar exports, and what your gross carbon footprint is, any abatement. So that's the green power or solar that you have, and then what your net carbon footprint is, which is, as we talked about, that's what you need to get to zero if you want to be net zero business. And yeah, it saves all your bills, and this is a really great way and tangible way to calculate your carbon footprint. Traditionally, this has been done by auditors or accountants who would gather the same data. So you would all have to prepare this sort of information, or this consumption information, and through Excel sheets, they would be able to calculate what your carbon footprint is. But our platform sort of enables the user to do that for themselves and educate them as well on that process. I might show you as well how the vehicle part looks like. So the way that works, you just add a vehicle. So you name it, and then it asks you different types of questions. And the reason why we ask that, what sort of make of the car is, and the year, and the body style, is the database in the back knows how efficient your car is then, and then we can know what your emissions is associated with your company car, which will look very different depending on what the car you have. And once you have your car in the system, again, it gets saved, and then you're able to just log the distance from to the total kilometers you've driven. And this is a really great way, an accurate way to calculate your carbon footprint. So this is our track page. Any questions so far on the track page? I'm gonna see if there's any questions in the chat. Okay, I guess we're all good. I'll just carry on. So the next page I will show you is action. So action it's an area where we try and help you to reduce your carbon footprint. And as I said, we're on the second step now where you're actually trying to reduce your current carbon footprint. And we try to make it look more like a project management style tool where you've got your not started areas, in progress, completed, and abandoned. And you can click here, add a new action plan. It will take you to these different categories where you can choose from the no behavior ones all the way up to the high investments. So similar to what I did in my presentation, so depending on how much you want to invest, you can select. I'll just go with the no cost for now. And right now, our application is scouted through the database. It's kind of like a peer learning platform where you're able to see all the different actions that our users have done. And they always do a quiz at the end to see what has been sort of successful. And if it deems to be successful, we add it to the platform, as well as our in-house team keeps adding every quarter to make sure it's up to date with the best sort of behaviors you can do. You can choose the different category. Let's just go with electricity for now. And this is the database that we have built over the years of running our company. And you can go through and see what sort of works for your business. I'll just go a bit slower, but things like set appropriate temperature for air conditioning. So very simple action you can do that will actually add up to reducing your carbon footprint. We also give you a little description of what an impact it has on your carbon footprint. So if it's medium, high, or low, so you have an understanding of each action. You can click continue. It gives you a description. You can add to that as well to make it a bit more specific for your team. Give it a due date. So we try and keep all our users very accountable. And from our previous experience, we see if we have a date on action, you're very much more likely to stick to it. You can actually add different users to the app. So either the ones that are in the app that you can add different users to, or non-app users that you just add their emails in. So this is a really great way to make this tool as part of your organization and not just have one sustainability champion who's doing all the work. So let's just add somebody in there. I won't click submit, but if I did, it would show up here in the not started area. And you can have a list of the ones you want to do, let's say every quarter. And it's a really great way to start reducing your carbon footprint. And yeah, the actions keep changing. And this is a really great way to make sure that you're doing sort of the best you can, because we're always adding new actions into the software as our platform is growing. So that is our action page. That is the second step of reducing your carbon footprint. I'm just going to look at a question real quickly. Our business has multiple sites. Does your platform allow you to enter details by site? Yes. So we have a lot of users who have numerical sites, and the way it works, if you click on your account, you can actually flick between different sites. So our demo account doesn't have multiple sites, but if it does, it would just say sites here, and you can enter different sites that all look exactly the same. And then you have one view that takes all the sites together and shows you what your total company's carbon footprint looks like. So I hope that answers your question. The last thing I'm going to show you is track, and this is really fun, especially if you're someone who likes data and is very data driven and likes analytical function of that. We actually take all the data and show it to you in a graph form. So I'll start with measure, which is the first section you guys saw. This gives you your total carbon footprint, and you can flick between the gross versus net to see the difference. It also gives you a split in these little bubbles. I think they all have a very similar carbon footprint, but normally the sizes of the bubbles sort of change. And if you select one, let's go with electricity, you're able to see a view. So you can either look at the view annually or monthly. So I'll just wait for that to load. And as you see, you get that split versus last year and this year, and able to actually compare if your carbon footprint is going up or down. And in our app, we always look at 3 different filters. So you can look at it through as the carbon view, on your cost view as well, and your usage. Usage is a really great view as well. If your company is getting bigger, maybe your carbon footprint is increasing, but you know that your usage is actually going down. And a lot of our users as well use the platform to actually reduce on their utility bills. As I said, reducing your carbon footprint and your utilities actually kind of go hand in hand, because you're changing those behaviors and trying to use them less. Yeah, so this gives you a really great view. I'll go back, and the same goes with all the other different areas. And it's just a really great way to get the information straight away. And this is a big difference from our formal industry, where you went to carbon accountants, where they had an Excel sheet and you would have to wait weeks and weeks for them to do the calculations. As soon as you upload data into the application, you can already play around with to see what your carbon footprint looks like, and have the data available straight away. So yeah, so that's everything for track. So we've seen measure, action, and track, just to give you a tangible idea of what that looks like. And I'll just bring it back to the dashboard that just gives you a little view of how you're doing this year compared to last year, and a split down as well of the different common areas and your net carbon footprint as well. So just the dashboard to give you an overview, so you don't have to jump into the different areas. And I think that's everything from my side in terms of showing you the application. I'm seeing that I've got 2 more questions here, so I'm just going to answer that. Okay, all good, Michelle. Great app. How much does it cost? Okay, I actually haven't put my pricing table up here. It's starting, if you're in a partnered area, which City Randwick is, it starts at $500 a year. And our application is based on the full-time staff number you have. So depending on how many FTE staff numbers you have in your organization, that's how we calculate the cost of using the application. Just that's how traditionally carbon footprints get calculated, what your FTE number looks like. I'm just gonna go back to my presentation. Before I answer a bit more information, I'll just take you this. Here's my email address and our website as well. If you guys have any specific questions, especially with the pricing, feel free to email me. I might as well email all of you the pricing list so you guys know, or if you have any other questions about your carbon footprint or your specific company, I'd love to answer. I've got a few more questions here and feel free to ask me as well. We've got last 5 minutes or so, so feel free to ask me any other questions you guys have. Is there any limit of how many years of data can be added to your platform? No, there's no limit. You can backtrack all the way to the last 10 years if you would like to. There is no limit on that. And we do have a lot of schools that do that. Yes, Julian, that's right. So any businesses that are based in the Randwick Council get a 50% off. So maybe I didn't clarify that specifically. It's not just on the first year. Any business gets a 50% off if you're in that partner area. We also have 28 other LGAs across Australia. So feel free to email me and I'll tell you if your business is in that area, and you'll also receive half price discount on our application. All right, and I want to say a big thank you to the Randwick Council again for hosting this amazing event. I'd like to know as well, let me know in the chat if you, I think I asked at the beginning, but I'd like to know if you guys went to any other events as well. I know it's been so great and really amazing to learn from each other and from our great community. Please click here to take a quick short survey on how you've liked this presentation and this talk. That would be greatly appreciated. And I'll be here for a bit longer if anybody has any other questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure teaching you a bit more about your carbon footprint. What does that look like? Give you a bit more insight into the industry. I hope that you guys have learned something. And as I've put the email, as I've my email address on the previous slides, feel free to email me if you guys have any other questions. Thank you. I'm seeing someone asking, can this app be used in countries rather than Australia? So currently we are only available in Australia. And the reason is that we always need the emission factors for the specific area and country. And we only have those for Australia. There has been a lot of talk about expanding it. So we might do that. I'll let you know. And please message in as well which country you're thinking of. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Pleasure. And yeah, feel free to ask. I mean, I've got still 10 minutes to be around here, so feel free to ask any other questions you guys have.